We are recording. If you're uncomfortable with your name showing, you can change your name to anonymous and then private message Melody with your name for our attendance. Also, if your Zoom name doesn't match the name that you have registered with, if you could please change that, and then we can make sure we get you on your attendance list. I'm going to go ahead and do our land acknowledgement. Texas Children in Nature Network is headquartered in Austin, and as such, I'm on the ancestral and unceded land of the Tonkawa, Comanche, and Sana people. Our ongoing colonial presence on Indigenous lands compels us to take action now to counteract the effects of colonization. The work we do through the Texas Children in Nature Network is one small step towards that effort. And in just a minute, I'm going to put a couple links in the chat about land acknowledgements and about those people groups. I would like to go ahead and welcome our speaker today. Cheryl Potemkin is at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden and Botanical Research Institute of Texas. We are happy that you could join us today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Yay, great. Thanks, Sarah. I'm so happy to be here and sharing about story walks. It's a project that we started probably in 2017, I think. Yeah, and we started that with a butterfly as patient, and we got funding, and one of the things that made my life very easy was having a teammate who was a former librarian. So we both had a big love of nature-based literature, and we found story walks and decided that we would try to pull that off. And here we are years later, and now I'm sharing with y'all. So let me pull up my slides. There they are. Are we seeing them?
Yes, we can see them.
All right. Yay. So, let's see. My screens are messing up. So, Storywalk started with a library in Vermont, the Kellogg Hubbard Library. And so anything that we do, we credit them with the creation of this story walk. So this is one of those. Here's the link right down here. But we do credit them, and that's all that they really ask of anybody who is creating a story walk and displaying a story walk, sort of using that specific vocabulary and title, is that you credit them with the creation of that idea. And we really like the idea of a story walk. It's been a really big hit for us here at the Fort Worth Botanic Garden. Ours is located outside of the paid entrance gates, the admission fee. So our story walk is open to the public year round for free. Anybody can come into our parking lot. We have a small natives garden called the Pollinator Pathway, and that's where our story walk is housed. So if you're in Fort Worth and you want to come check out our story walk, do please come by. We had originally created it with the idea that it would move and feature different gardens, but once the garden started charging admission, we decided that we really liked it to be that free feature, engaging our families and our community in a literacy and nature activity, and that it's not behind any kind of paywall. So these were a lot of our reasons for starting a story walk. I think these are a lot of reasons that many people look at a story walk. Over the pandemic, it was really appreciated that we had a self-guided experience where people could distance themselves. It's still really enjoyable to have a self-guided experience. It supports literacy for a lot of ages, even though I'm going to talk about what age group I pick books for. it connects to the nature that's around that, around our story walk, and it encourages movement. And that's a big priority for us. For you Texas folks, it ties into that whole OLE piece, outdoor learning environments, and encouraging healthy movement. So instead of sitting and reading a book, which is a lovely experience, and I've done it a lot. I sat and read Storytime today, but the idea of moving through a book is also really nice. I love it. And then as far as family engagement, because we do structure our story walks to where we want to be fostering communication between those who visit together. Ideally a family, but we've also seen really cute couples strolling our story walk. But it supports literacy, not just in terms of reading, but being able to communicate ideas is a really strong science literacy need. So the thought of having those conversations and communicating your ideas with the people around you is a big part of literacy, especially for pre-K children who are pre-literate. So conversations are literacy. Yep. And then when you have those meaningful conversations in nature, that just fosters both a meaningful connection with your family or whoever you're visiting with, and the nature that surrounds you. So it really ties all of that together. And for us, we start with picking a book. So maybe not everybody starts there, but it really started for us. It was, man, I would love to share this book with the public. How can we do that? And I'm really picky about our books. I have certain things that I look for. So not every book that I love, I think, is a story walk book. And I'll also start with the idea of copyrights. Maybe it's my husband and he really drilled in copyrights because he's a librarian to me. But I really think that a story walk should celebrate the authors and the illustrators and the literature that's been created. That's an art form. So I like to honor those creators by adhering to copyright law. And how we do that is you can either buy several copies of the book to cut up and put on display, because when you're buying those copies of the book, those royalties do go back to the creators. Or we work with publishers to get the rights to display. So yeah, and there was at one point we did pay for rights to a book, but at this point we work more with agreements with the publishers, so that knowing that we're a nonprofit, that this is an educational opportunity, that we also offer to carry those books in our gift shop for those people who visit and want to take the book home. Usually those are pretty good arguing points, and the publisher will give us the rights to display the book. And sometimes they just give us the rights kind of outright and we can display it on our own time, or they give us a time frame, like, yeah, you have the rights to display this book for the next 18 months. So, and we work with the publishers to get the rights to that book versus purchasing multiple copies. Those are two really different options that you have out there. I was really compelled to get the rights so that we could reprint the book on UV resistant material. In Texas, even with the protective frames that we use, the sun is just brutal. So we could be replacing those books once a month due to fading if we're displaying in the summertime, versus the UV resistant materials give us about 6 months. So let me get into how I'm picky with books. I want picture books for engaging artwork. I want a limited amount of words per page. If you put too much text on there, people are just going to breeze through it. They're not going to stop to read it anyway. So I'm usually looking at early childhood picture books with 1 or 2 sentences per page. I want a subject that connects to our space. Luckily for us, we have prairies and we have trees. We have a variety that we can connect to, but you probably are not going to find an ocean book on our story walk. It's it's just a little bit of a stretch for us. And yeah, oh, and artwork that highlights what's hard to see. For me, that means roots. It could mean camouflaged birds. Here's an example from one of our story walks. This is how to find a bird. I want illustrations that can show our younger audiences that may not have that attention to detail or that pre-existing knowledge that, yeah, there are roots or that there are bugs under the ground. I want illustrations that show me something that we might not see every day, just so our younger visitors can have an idea, both in terms of vocabulary and a picture of what it is that's happening. So that's me and one of my personal things. So my teammates tease me because I get excited when I find roots in a book. And then the other thing I do is I include a prompt, and we can see that here. This top part is what's actually on the page, and then we have little prompts under each page or each spread that hopefully connects what's happening on that page with what's happening in the nature around them, or a thought that they could discuss with those that they're visiting with. So including a prompt. I look a lot at, and this comes from sort of read aloud skills. So if you're familiar with doing a read aloud that kind of goes beyond just reading, if you're doing a read aloud that connects with your listener, we might be counting things on the page for math skills, looking at observation skills, prompting our visitors to look beyond the page. What can you see around that connects to the page? Maybe a fun fact, wondering questions. So this really is, the prompt is a perfect place to foster a connection with nature. Use carefully chosen books and taking cues from that text and the illustrations to feature your surrounding nature and establish meaningful connections. So a lot of my questions and prompts work their way up Bloom's revised taxonomy. I don't want to just be hitting on those identification questions. We might reference color, we might talk about counting things that are known, but I really want to foster more creative conversations between our visitors. So recall is nice, but I like to look at creative questions. So, and it, beyond just fostering those moments, it can model for your parents who visit how to have those conversations beyond their visit with the story walk. This is something that we do a lot within all of our programs, is we try to provide those deeper conversational questions to our parents visiting, so that we're going beyond the what do you knows and that sort of quizzing atmosphere. Prompts will also slow people down as they move through the story walk. So in a good way, you don't want them just kind of blowing through it. So as they move through the book, they'll stop to look at what is around the page, especially if you're referencing it. They'll stop to have those conversations as a group. They'll stop to try yoga poses if you include those. We occasionally throw those in there, or a movement challenge. And I'll talk about that as I flip through. I have a few more examples here from our other storybooks. This one is from Round. And this is math skills. So we're talking about patterns, looking at the patterns that are on the page, and that patterns can be sounds. So can you come up with a pattern of sounds? So this one is connecting the seeds that we see on the page to the grasses that were around this page. This one was really nice because it was almost fluid. We have almost the exact same grasses off the page as we did on the page. Remember a time when you were bold like red. So that's one of those prompts where you have to talk about, well, what does red make you feel? And then what is a memory that connects with that? This is one of those fun facts, in case people don't know what a murmuration is. It's just a fun word and I like to say it. And then this one, I put this one up there because we saw so many people interacting around this prompt. And one of our favorite memories were that we were crossing between buildings and walking the pollinator pathway, and we saw a teenage couple. It was really talking, I mean, when I wrote the prompt, it was about gross motor skills for children, but it was enough of a challenge that we caught a teenage couple coming through the story walk and trying to do that movement. Can you spin around and walk in the circle at the same time like the planets? It was really cute. It was a really cute moment. So it's nice. It's nice to see people slow down and interact with your prompts. And when I am, let me see if I can pop out of screen sharing and I'll share with you guys what we have. Am I still sharing?
Yes, and we do have a quick question, Cheryl.
Yes.
So the question is, you take pages from several books and put them on a path, not a whole storybook?
Oh no, a whole storybook generally.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. There's my stop share. So this is our next storybook that we'll be putting up, Señorita Mariposa. And when we're first starting a story walk, I'll flip through our book and I'll have a stack of Post-it notes because that's just how I work. And I start to kind of write notes about, well, what do I wonder? What could other people wonder? And I start making notes and slapping those on my pages as I go through the book so that I remember what prompts I might like to create once we're into that digital phase and prepping for print. So looking at our butterflies fly 60 miles or more in a day, and it's, well, that could be the distance between here and from Fort Worth to West Texas, not West Texas, but West like the city. I was trying to think of, well, what is about 60 miles that our families visiting would know. So we try to make those connections, but I just flipped through the whole book. Do butterflies sleep at night? Yeah, that song is great. We had an intern last fall who brought her ukulele and sang it for us. It was so wonderful.
We have a question here, Cheryl. Do you have a list of your favorite nature-related picture books? We are trying to expand our library for our elementary school garden lessons, especially pre-K3, pre-K4.
I do. Let me share that as well. So this is a list, and I can have Sarah send this out this is a list I made a few years ago. So I definitely have more on this list. I really try to keep up with what is being released currently. I know Vine Books is a good one to follow. Kids Gardening. I'm trying to think. APGA, I think, also releases a book list. NAEE, I think, releases a book list. So I try to follow what's being released. I have a big Amazon wish list, although I mostly try to work with our local bookstore to order them. So, but these are a few. Two other books that are not on this list that we have coming up for story walks that we have the permissions for and will be on future schedule is Finding Wild and Run Wild. I think there are a great amount of books coming out about connection to nature. Do a shout out to an extended part of our community. I think Christina Soontornvat came out with Ramble Shamble Children, which is a book about counting in nature. So that is that's on my watch list as well.
Cheryl, with that in mind, I think our next question goes well, which is, what does the process look like when you receive rights to books and are in formatting them to add your prompts in for the final copies that that physically go out onto the walk?
Yeah. Yes, that's a great question. So in the past, I've worked with a couple of librarian teammates on this. So my first librarian teammate was very bold, and they would either email the author directly or the publisher directly to get those rights, and would just go through a long list. I think her process involved a lot of no's, but we came away with a handful of great books that we got to display. And considering that we only display maybe 2 or 3 a year, it wasn't that, it wasn't a drawback at all. It was just really canvassing our wish list and seeing what came back. Our current process looks a little bit more formal, working with our new librarian. I think a lot of publishers have a form where you can request those rights, and they send you just, it's very, like I said, it's very formal. So you fill out a form, and then you get a confirmation that they received your request, and then you'll get a form letter back saying that you have the rights within a time span to display it. Originally, my first librarian partner would hound people, and we were able to get the digital copy of the book. Or it could just have been the publishers that we were working with, but we are working with a new publisher, at least the books for Señorita Mariposa and Finding Wild and Run Wild have all told us that they are not able to provide us with the digital copy of the book, like that printing proof, and that we're totally licensed to print and display on UV materials, but as far as getting those into the format we need them in, we'll have to scan the book or take pictures of the book. So that's a process that we're kind of wading through now, since it's new for us. Finding someone with a scanner large enough in our area to be able to accommodate that. We have a partnership with our public library, although I'm looking for a scanning service because our public library, while they allow me to come and scan the books, I will have to do it myself. So I'm hoping to find a community partner that will do the scan for me, and we have grant money to pay for that within reason. So that's where we're searching. Once we have the digital copies, I work with those in InDesign. Our displays are through Barking Dog, which Let's see. I'll give you guys a new share. So Barking Dog Exhibits, they worked with that original team in Vermont, that original library in Vermont, to create these pedestals. There we go. There's a good look at them. Where the bottoms will unscrew, that bottom part of the frame right in here. There's a couple of hex screws and you slide the page up into it and then secure it. So they're weather resistant. Everything's behind acrylic. They're about 18 inches tall by 24 wide. So we will resize the book to where it takes up about 22 inches because you lose a couple of inches to the wraparound. So, but let me see, looking through here. You can see that some of them are more displays and kind of signage where maybe it's a collage. There are people who have decided to tell their own stories. I know that when we did this session at the Texas Children in Nature Summit, someone in the workshop was talking about that they had sort of this oral history of the land and they were trying to get someone to write that story for them. So this would have been a good option for them, talking about including those historical pictures along with the story of the land. But it looks like we have a self-published by an elementary school, so you can absolutely create your own stories. I would recommend laminating any loose pages and don't put anything in these frames. They're not incredibly weather tight, but they are weather resistant. So don't put anything in these that you can't lose. And displays like this, I want to say cost around $5,000 to $7,000 for us. We wrote a grant to get the original pedestals installed.
Cheryl, we have quite a few questions about the pedestal.
Let me pull up the chat. Yeah, I'll try to keep up.
So no, that's okay. I'm happy to read them to you. First one is, can these be built for mobile use?
There are a lot of options for mobile use, not necessarily these. These are pretty heavy and do not move well. I mean, when we were originally installing these, we had the idea that we'd maybe move them every 6 months, and our staff who installed them were like, I don't know about all that. They're quite heavy. I would look at other options for mobile use because I don't think that you need to spend $10,000 to get a good story log. It just so happened to be what we wrote the grant for.
And then, yeah, next up we have, how many of those displays do you feel like, how many do you have and how many do you feel like someone might need in order to set up kind of a permanent thing they could change out for themselves?
That was where my librarian teammates came in handy. Most children's storybooks come with about 40 pages, which is about 20 spreads. We put a spread per display, you know. Oh wait, I'm not on screen, but anyway, yes, the spread is the 2 pages together.
So about 20?
Yeah, about 20.
And then our next question about the display boxes is, how big is the gap for the page to fit into? Could it accommodate pages that are printed on corrugated plastic, about 1/4 inch thick?
Without the acrylic protection, you could totally, I think you could totally slide just the corrugated cardboard in there, but you would not get the acrylic sheet on top.
And then a question about the cost. They said $5,000 to $7,000 per pedestal or total?
That was total. And and we ordered, I want to say I ordered close to 40 pedestals, not no, like hoping that we might be able to do 2-story walks at the same time. So I would probably put it close to $5,000 for a single story walk.
And then, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Cheryl.
And then I was going to, if we're talking about cost, then the cost to print on the materials that we chose, which is a thin acetate, not paper. So it's a thin sheet of plastic with UV inks. To print a full book is about $500 with our local sign shop, give or take.
And then our last question specifically about these, there's more questions when we get to the Q&A period, but is, do you include the cover page?
Yes, oftentimes I do. And the cover page is nice to include. It usually has some lovely artwork, and it introduces the title and the author. So again, honoring and crediting those who made the book in the first place. But instead of a prompt with the title page, that is where we credit our sponsors. We have a local foundation that supports our story walk. So we wrote the grant for the first big one to get everything installed, and then it's about $1,000 a year gift so that we can print 2 more story walks a year.
I was wrong. I have more questions about the display. If the 5,000 to 7,000 is kind of out of their price range, have you found someone that you could a way that you could recommend for a lower cost option?
Yes, that's my next slide.
Glad I could provide that transition for you, Cheryl.
Yay! So there are short-term and there are long-term options. So long-term, of course, being that barking dog display. You can also see that there's little wood pedestals. I think it's just a flat piece of wood on top of probably like a railroad tie or one of those 4x4s with just a sheet of acrylic drilled on top. And I think that they've just cut the books apart and slid those under the acrylic. But there is, yeah, the one homemade, and then this is the manufactured. And then over here in the short term, we have just those corrugated signs. Somebody was asking about corrugated signs. You can totally do an 18 by 24 or 24 by 36 corrugated sign on those little, they're like H posts is what I call them. They're the little aluminum posts. They're not going to hold up to a lot of weather, but they will hold up for, I don't know, probably a good month, unless you have a big storm, right? They fall over in the wind, but we use that kind of signage a lot. So there's nothing stopping you from getting the rights and printing a book in a less permanent way. So those little corrugated signs work. And then the other one over here on the tree, that's just pages cut apart and either laminated or put into a little slider. So you can set out a story walk for just a day if you want and have people walk through, especially if you're just doing a special event. It's a nice option. So it doesn't have to be permanent at all. Yeah, there's a lot of good ways to do this. So I would say that most of the temporary or short-term displays involve purchasing multiple copies of that book and then cutting them up so that they can be spread out. And again, that means that by purchasing multiple copies of that book, that your book creators, authors, illustrators are getting paid the royalties. And it's a great method. Families and guests still enjoy moving through the pages. It doesn't have to look fancy at all. People are really just looking for something to move them along the path. So The long-term exhibit, of course, takes longer to get started and installed. It was probably a year-long process for us to even get to the point where we were ready to display. So, like I said, we ordered through Barking Dog, which was recommended through that original storybook library or Storywalk library. And the metal frames have held up to the Texas weather. So, and oh, in my notes, I did have my dates right. They were installed in 2017. So, and you don't have to print the books if you're using some of those longer term solutions. You can still do the cut and piece method with those. And again, if you are trying to reprint on UV ink or with UV materials, that those files do require some TLC and some I guess graphic design know-how, or at least some familiarity with programs and getting things ready to print. And we do resize to fit the frame. Yay, I'm looking at everybody's questions again. Ideal space between displays. Ours is tighter than what I would like it to be, but we just work within the space that we were given. I would like them to be much more spread out. Right now, our story walk, you can stand at the first page and see where the book ends. But I don't think that there's any ideal. I think the ideal is whatever works with what you've got, but I'm a big proponent of that. Just making things work and celebrating what you have. These were all big things that we considered when working on our story walk. So install pieces on a loop or with a clear beginning and end. And that plays into the idea of a looping pathway. I'd mentioned Olay, Texas a little bit, but the security of a clear beginning and an end with no way to become lost encourages use and movement for the average human. I mean, I know there's a lot of us on this call who love the idea of getting a little bit lost. I certainly do. I don't mind taking off on a path, but when you're talking about engaging the public, especially those who might be in the stroller set, the security of a clear beginning and end definitely plays a part in their choice to engage with what you're putting out there. So I like to make it easily accessible. I really do try to think about ADA accessibility when we're setting out a story walk. You want to make sure that your target audience, which is small children and their families, are able to quickly get to it. Solid pathways that accommodate strollers and children, still figuring out those gross motor movements. Although some balance challenges and a tree cookie stepping stone along the way are great connections to your book. Yeah, I really try to think about accessibility when installing. There's that distance between pages. And like I said, having to do that again, knowing it is permanent, I might have argued for more space to spread out our pages. I would have liked to have made it longer. Do you want your story, number 3, do you want your story walk to be movable? Oh, yes. Being able to see the next one ahead of you. That's a good call, Lisa. Yeah, so that people don't get lost. A permanent exhibit is not always the best solution. So I talked about this, that we had originally planned to move our story walk from garden to garden, but the solution that we invested in really was not a good option to move it from space to space. And it works much better as a permanent solution in our pollinator pathway. And despite the things that I might do over again, I'm really, really pleased with where it is. So I'm happy that it's permanent, and I'm happy it is where it is. I wish I could have spread out a little bit more. Yeah, let's see. For my notes and making sure I give you all those little things that I scribbled down along the way. It was like, oh, people need to know this. So how many per year? That's important when trying to budget, especially if you're reprinting or even if you're buying multiple copies of books, because you know you could easily buy 5 or 10 copies of books, which ends up being a cost, right? So we try to run 2 to 3 story walks per year. And like I said, we have a funding partner that helps us make it through that. But yeah, how many you want to run per year certainly affects what choices you make in permanence or how you display. Funding and partnerships. Again, printing for our average story walk is around $500, usually a little bit less, but you know, I kind of round it up just to make sure. We'll see what if printing costs have changed when I take this next book to our printing partner. So I think other important partners that you can look at that are not necessarily funding partners would be your local library. I know that even though we have a librarian here with us at Britt and the Botanic Garden that helps us, we're a very small library, so we don't have all the resources. So we do partner with our local library. We partner with Read Fort Worth, who advertises when we get a new story walk out. That's always helpful. We've been able to partner with local bookstores who came in and sold books along with us. When we had an author visit, our first story walk, we made a whole event out of it. I think for funding and grants, I see you, Elizabeth. I would look at IMLS grants because I think that there's a lot of partnership grants in there that could apply to a story walk. And then local foundations. It was our garden club that funded our story walk, and they fund things within our garden specifically, but we knew that that would be a project that would appeal to them, and the kind of projects that they like to do within our garden. So we were very specific in our ask and knew who we were reaching out to. But it's possible that you have a funder in your midst, or you know, friends of the library. Yeah, I would start digging around your community and see who your proponents of literacy are, and look for partnerships in there. And Sarah shared her grants page too. Yeah, local literacy programs, your librarians, libraries, independent bookstores. They've helped us find books. They've helped us preview books. All kinds of stuff. Contact publishers, promote story walk through their organizations. They've helped us to purchase books in large quantities, and they've helped us to contact authors for in-person visits. And then a great thing, I love to create an event when we open a story walk. It doesn't always happen, hasn't happened for a while. We've just kind of been putting them out there and letting our partner organizations kind of advertise. But when we first opened A Butterfly's Patient, we were able to bring the author out, schools came out, we had a whole event around it. So it's a nice thing to feature as part of an event. So families opened the first story walk with community partners. Again, that was Read Fort Worth and the public library. They brought literacy activities. They brought resources. We had people signing up for library cards in the middle of the story walk. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, and a book signing, of course. So I think that's most of what I have. I don't even know where we're at as far as time. Is it good for, are we good?
We've got about 15 minutes left, and so I'm going to try to get through the questions that we haven't gotten to yet. And folks, please feel free to put more questions in the chat. I will get to as many as we can. So the first one is, are you able to share some of your favorite prompts that you've used as part of those story walks?
Yes, I mean, I did share a couple of those in the slideshow that I'll share with you guys and that can be sent out. But so much of it is very specific to either that page of the book or what is happening on our pathway during that season when the book is on display. So they're really specific prompts. Usually there are a few like the prompt for sharing a memory when you felt bold like red, or the movement. I really like a movement activity just because when I walk the pathway and I can see other people doing the movement, I know that they're engaged. So but that's just really rewarding for me to see people interacting with our space. So I like to include yoga poses a lot, but tree pose makes it easy.
And then we have, in your experience, are there certain publishers that are more willing to give permission to use their books for a story walk?
Oh, I would have to go look at our records to see if there were a pattern, if there was a pattern. I've been lucky to have a librarian partner, so she usually just sends me a yes or no, and I haven't been looking at who the publishers are, but I could look at who that is. The publisher for April Pulley Sayers books, like Full of Fall and Raindrops Roll, their publishing company has definitely given us permissions in the past. They've been really easy to work with. And I'll have to look at who our new round of publishers are, our most recent approvals. Let's see. I can tell you who did Señorita Mariposa. So Penguin Random House did this one, and we got a yes from them. I'm guessing that our other two, which came back, were very similar in format, were also those books. Let me see if I can pull them up real quick. Any other questions while I'm pulling that up?
We do. So our next one is, how long do you set the books out for? And second part to that, do you ever store previous books to set out again?
We set them out, we display them for about 6 months, sometimes longer. But on average, 2 per year, 6 months. And then we do save them, hoping that we'll get the rights to display again. And those go into our library. Well, first they have to go through the freezer to kill any bugs before they get stored in our library, which is part of our herbarium. So we have some linen boxes that they're stored in. I might have one in the office here.
And then we have a question, have you ever put out any bilingual stories?
Not yet. Señorita Mariposa will be our first.
Another publisher question.
Mm-hmm.
If we cut up multiple books and cut them up, do we still have to get permission from the publishers? So I'm guessing if you're using multiple books throughout the story walk.
I don't think so. I think that if you're cutting up multiple books, then the rights are within, and that comes from the, and let me put it in the chat, the story walk page, because the Kellogg Hubbard Library, their page was pretty helpful in terms of getting us started, especially the FAQs. And let me post that here too.
Sherry had asked the question about the networking event for swapping storybooks, and she clarified, not necessarily an event, but an organization where folks who have story walks kind of can trade printed copies.
Not that I'm aware of. I think we're one of the few who prints our own, mostly because I was concerned about how the weather would affect our ability to display anything long term. Most of what Kellogg Hubbard puts out is really about cutting up and laminating and trying to protect, but I didn't find, when we started, I didn't find many other people who were asking for permission to reprint.
And then Michelle is asking if you could share some other locations that you know of in Texas that have story walks. So maybe they can, I'm not sure where Michelle is. I'll have to scroll up and look and see if she told us that maybe she can see one close to her.
I know that I had talked to somebody in Waco, but that was a few years ago, that they were trying to put one up in their park. There are definitely some libraries in the Metroplex that have put them up. I don't know anyone who keeps a consistent one up because they do deteriorate. Oh, there is a really nice, there was the big one, I think it's at Zilker in Austin, where they did The Very Hungry Caterpillar, and theirs are huge. They're like 3 foot by 4 foot signs.
Yeah, Michelle put down that she's in Georgetown. Michelle, I know that Melody put in the chat that Austin ISD has some on several of their school campuses, and then the Austin Public Libraries have done some as well. And I believe the Round Rock Library has one. Oh, and then Jan put that Lake Sheldon State Park has one. We have San Antonio Public Library has one. So yeah, there should be some close to you. And I do know that for Nature Rocks Texas, as I found out about some, I'm trying to make sure those are listed in our green spaces as well on Nature Rocks. So yeah.
So back to publishers. Looks like all 3 that we have, Señorita Mariposa, Finding Wild, and Running Wild. Those are all Penguin and Random House. Penguin and Random House. And then Simon & Schuster is who we worked with for Full of Fall. So those are the April Police Air books. And they were one of those publishers that took the time to share their digital files with us. So that was really nice.
We don't have any more questions in the chat. So just to give everyone a moment to add one if they so desire. I did put a link in the chat for an evaluation for today's webinar. So if y'all could fill that out, we'd greatly appreciate it. And then next month's webinar is called Disability, Finding Ways to Integrate Nature and Accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like it's going to be a fantastic one. And so please register for that. And then I would be remiss if I didn't remind you all that tickets for the summit are now available. So if you are not familiar, we have our Texas Children in Nature Network Summit that happens every year. Today's session came out of a session that Cheryl did last year during our summit. We were up actually at her site last year. This year we are going to be down in Austin. And so I hope that we get to see you there. It's December 7th through 9th. And we have some really great sessions that are going to be happening. It's kind of just picture these webinars for 3 days, and they're really fantastic. So hope that you all can join us. And no more questions have come through. So thank you so much, Cheryl. I really appreciate your time today. And thank you everyone for attending. And I hope to see y'all next month.
Thanks, everyone. I'm reading through and making notes. Y'all had some great suggestions up there.